in early 70s, the league formed itself as the Ontario Major Junior Hockey League with its first commissioner in 1974, and that was Clarence Tubby Schmaltz. In 78-79, they started a new search for a new commissioner, and that became Bill Began. Mr. Schmaltz retired December 31st, 78, and I believe Bill Began started December 15th. I think there were media reports that he walked out on the governor's meeting at the All-Star game in Sault Ste. Marie in 79 there. Sherry Basson took over as the interim commissioner at that point, and the search was on for a new one.
I was very fortunate. I had Dave Branch play for me. He played for me in junior and would have been, in my opinion, an unbelievable professional. During the 60s, an opportunity came. Bill Hanley was running the league in Ontario, and they were looking for somebody, and I went to the management, including Bill Hanley, and told them that the young man who played for me would be a perfect guy, and I recommended Dave Branch. They couldn't get anybody any better, in my opinion.
It was clear that the next commissioner would need to be someone with a bold vision and the determination to bring about real change. Enter David Branch, a relatively unknown executive who had earned respect in the hockey community for his strong administrative skills and vision. Branch was hired not just to manage the league, but to transform it.
So and I got to know him, got to see his work. And so when I knew that we were looking for somebody, and I had my eye on him right from, I knew what he was about and knew his character, knew how responsible he was.
He never stops, has never stopped working for the betterment of the league. There's never been anything that is wrapped up with finality so that it can never be changed, because there's always the possibility of improving it.
He earned his way to that position, so there was never any question in my mind that he wasn't qualified.
And the first few times you talk to him, just the nature of his, gruff voice and his persona, he can be a little intimidating. And it's not until you get to know him more and peel back the layers that you get to really see what Dave Branch is all about. And I've come to greatly appreciate just the real skill he has for making that connection with people.
The first step in Branch's vision was bold: to separate the OHA and create a new league identity. In 1980, the Ontario Hockey League was born.
We met and he presented this whole thing about being a separate entity governed by us with an affiliation. The league was excited about being a separate concept because we wanted to be self-directed. He's the guy that initiated the whole concept. And that's how we became the OHL. We needed to be self-directed for the way we were growing. From a business standpoint, from a hockey standpoint, and still understand the regulations of the CHA and the OHA.
When you look at the brand development of the Ontario Hockey League, if you go back to history here in 1979, the league was known as the Ontario Major Junior Hockey League, as you all know, and had virtually no autonomy as a league. The league was positioned as a member of the Ontario Hockey Association. In short order, under Dave's leadership, the league rebranded to the Ontario Hockey League and was secured total control and autonomy for the league's member teams. Today, the OHL brand is one of the strongest hockey brands in the world, and certainly North America and parts of Europe all recognize the significance of the OHL and the OHL brand. The point is, under Dave's leadership, the OHL has become a leader in the hockey community. It sits as a member of the Ontario Hockey Federation.
Think about how hockey was played back when Dave came onto the league in the late 70s, into the 80s, early 90s. Like, hockey was a different game, and it was not a game that maybe everybody could be proud of based on everything that was happening on the ice. There really was a lot of policies that were brought in, regulations that were brought in to curb a lot of what people were recognizing was somewhat antiquated in our game, the fighting and that type of thing. And so Through Dave's leadership and the support of the owners, absolutely, there was so much change on the ice. The on-ice product was something that certainly he did a lot of work on. The off-ice player experience as well as the player support programs, whether it's through the CMHA, through the OCR, the Ontario Coalition of Rape Crisis Centers, where we did the Respect for Women program. So that would, again, is player support programs. And the evolution, year upon year upon year, the on-ice rules continued to change too. So it wasn't like you did something and then just rest on your laurels. You continue to challenge yourself to how can we be better? And that's where Dave's leadership certainly contributed to that.
Under his leadership, the league solidified key agreements with the NHL, Hockey Canada, and the World Junior Championships. A move that not only secured the league's future, but also raised its profile on the global stage.
Well, back in the 70s, the WHA was taking players too, with either their own draft or just recruiting them directly from junior hockey. And the NHL, the forerunners, Canadian Major Junior Hockey League, always had an agreement with the NHL for how their teams would operate. But the NHL teams did draft players after, at age 18. And that's where that became challenging, especially if the player wasn't playing a whole lot in the NHL. There were guys that got drafted and didn't pan out the way a first-round player would because they maybe went too early.
I wrote the first contract we ever had with the NHL. And I said, David, I'm going to write this contract. You're going to cross the T's and dot the I's. No problem. So we put this contract together. We had a CHL meeting down the hall with all the owners from Quebec, Western Hockey League, and Ontario Hockey League to present this contract. Dave was really good. He sat back and they prepared it and presented it to the Siegler. Siegler presented it to the owners. And a month later, we had a signed contract with them. And that was Dave, and that's how Dave initiated his relationship. And one of the big factors was we have this relationship today with the NHL is because of Dave Branch.
Well, there was no question that the system was completely flawed in the late 70s, early 80s, because all the World Junior Championships, such as they were, it was really just a case of sending last year's Memorial Cup champion and maybe bolstered by a few other players. But if you really think about it, last year's Memorial Cup champion might have graduated 9 or 10 players, and they weren't a very good team. So Canada was sending this really inferior product to the World Junior Championship. And I know that Dave was instrumental and as part of Canada's movement to come up with the program of excellence. Obviously, Murray Costello and the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association, the forerunners of Hockey Canada, they very much wanted to put together a system that allowed for the best players, best junior age players in Canada to go. And so the program of excellence started, I believe it was 1982. And again, it was a case of convincing individual club teams, yes, you're going to lose your best players for a period of time at Christmas and New Year's, but ultimately, as a collective, it's going to be better for the game of hockey. It's going to be better for junior hockey. And of course, the rest on that, as far as the World Juniors goes, is history.
They score! Matt Halishuk with a golden goal for Canada! World Junior Hockey Champions for the 4th year in a row!
So my first actual meeting with Dave was when I was interviewed in January of 2006. And that was for the newly created league role of Director of Player Recruitment and Education Services. He was always there to support, always there providing great leadership, feedback when needed, and a helping hand. But he allowed sort of a clean slate to create the role, which was really wonderful. I learned very quickly about how much he cared about the player. And it came across authentically and genuinely his commitment towards any 16-year-old, 17-year-old young person and saying to the parents, entrust your son with us and we will look after your boy and help him to grow into being a man. And hey, if there's a program that's not working well as a league. Let's learn to adjust and adapt and create new programming to make it a better environment for the player experience, for the player development, both on and off the ice. His values of putting the players and the player safety first never wavered, and that's something to be admired.
OHL has given me such an opportunity to grow as a player and as a person, and really round out your life and become a man and really grow just in all aspects of life, and it's what junior hockey is all about.
As the league began to stabilize, new challenges emerged. In the early 90s, the OHL faced a high-profile test of Branch's leadership, setting a precedent for how the OHL would handle exceptional talent. It was about the league's commitment to nurturing the best, wherever they came from.
David's a very practical man, and I think that practicality served the league well in the sense that he recognized there was a unique situation. Eric Lindros was drafted by the Sioux Greyhounds. He did not want to go there.
All the teams are in a favorable spot heading into the draft. So that is a basic premise of our league. Dave said we have to change this rule, and which was done. It was basically the Eric Lindros rule, is that first round draft choices could be traded between the 1st and the 10th of January.
Well, what I recall is being 16 years old and not the most mature 16-year-old out there. And stopping in a few times when I was playing Bantam and seeing what was going on with brothers of guys that I played with that were playing in the north, and what was occurring up there, and it wasn't, it wasn't a good fit.
And sort of the old dogmatic traditional approach was, well, if you don't want to go there, then fine, you're not going to play in our league. And that sounds good in theory, but at the same time, I think David recognized we're a much better league if Eric Lindros is in it. So it's not a matter of subverting your principles to get somebody in the league who you want will be good for business, although there's certainly a strong element of that, no doubt about it. But it was more a case of we've got to recognize that not every player who's drafted by the team that he's drafted by wants to go there. So can there be a mechanism put in place that will allow that player to go to a different spot without submarining and taking away the team's rights and rewards, if you will, for finishing at the low end of the totem pole and picking first or at the high end of the draft?
Well, I mean, it wasn't much of a process, really. It was just a rule that said that you couldn't trade a first-round draft pick, and wherever you got drafted, you had to go. And basically, Dave reversed it. I had an offer to go to the University of Michigan on a full scholarship. I had graduated high school in 2.5 years, written my SATs, and had good marks in that, and was all set to go from CompuWare to the University of Michigan, and if I wasn't traded at Christmas. So I ended up getting traded around then and heading over to the World Juniors, and came back from World Juniors and went right to Oshawa, and university hadn't the semester didn't start until the spring. So I went to the high school in Whitby, which is right on the border of Oshawa, and then from there I went right to York for that summer and started taking university classes that summer.
So they put in place not just a rule for Eric Lindros, although he was the impetus for change, but even that exists today, where if players don't want to go to a particular franchise in the OHL, there's a mechanism in place where the team that drafted them gets compensation for that, and the player ultimately has an opportunity to perhaps go somewhere else.
A standing room only crowd of 4,100 has come to see the debut of 16-year-old Eric Lindros as an Oshawa General.
The rules always were what they were. Well, sometimes you've got to adapt for these exceptional players. Dave did, again, in the best interest of the league. And we had to play Eric Lindros 10 times. I wish he had gone to school, but he should have been in the league.
The league's foundation now secure, Branch turned his attention to expansion. What started as a league of 14 teams under Branch's leadership began to grow, reaching new communities, new markets, and new fans. The OHL was no longer just a league. It was a force in the hockey world, a proving ground for future stars, and a model for junior hockey leagues everywhere.
Before I was actively involved in an ownership role, you saw it from a distance. So you saw the leadership of an orchestra conductor leading a group of individuals who loved the game but needed a lot of direction, and Dave provided that. You know, in the early 80s, the first expansion to Belleville and to Guelph, and what it meant and how that. So I got to see it before I was actively involved. And I got to see and experience the experience of the Guelph Platers and what it did for community. And Dave knew that. Dave had a very clear on it. So as a builder, and then simultaneously, Dave was, you know, co-leader of the CHL. And watching him grow in that way, I mean, the CHL, what it is today from what it was, it has Dave Branch's footprints and imprints all over it.
Well, I think every league, whether it's the National Hockey League, the American Hockey League, OHL, WHL, QMJHL, you know, obviously there's strength in numbers, and with the number of really good young hockey players that are being produced all across the country, but certainly in Ontario or the Northeast US, you know, there was obviously a demand for the product, and you want to do it in such a way that you don't water down your product. And I think if you look back on it now, I don't think anybody, when they're looking at the quality of hockey across Canada with the expansion that's taken place with CHL teams, or even the National Hockey League for that matter, would suggest that the product's being watered down. And by expanding the number of teams and going into different markets, you're strengthening the base of operations, you're exposing more people to that brand of hockey, and you're creating new fans, and you're creating a potential source of new players. To go to Erie, to have been in Plymouth, to have been in Saginaw and Flint, to have local kids that are able to go to the rink and see what OHL hockey is all about and want to play for that team one day, it only increases your potential pool of talent.
Today, live from the Quinte Sports Center in Belleville, it's the Belleville Bulls against the Guelph Storm.
The growth of the league in the 80s, you know, with the TV Game of the Week concept, which was probably Dave's brainchild sort of thing.
And we got a bigger package when we did with TSN. So we had a TSN package, and that grew, and now we were growing more in terms of in television.
You know, those opened more doors, you know, that growth there. So it just started really snowballed to a certain extent, by all means.
By the end of the 1980s, the OHL was transformed. What was once a struggling league was now thriving, and it was just the beginning. David Branch had laid the foundation, but the true legacy of his leadership was still to unfold.